a hug. This video is titled The Alpha State
and its amplification through hormones. Well, the stomach, actually the brain, well,
Peace be with you.
as a sort of a prelude to the next video that's coming up, as it's a bit of an understanding of plasma, in the next video, we are going to start talking a bit about what gold plasma is about and its relevance and the conception of the use of true monatomic gold and some differences between what we know as hormones. Also, as the O.r.m.e itself and as the plasma, that is a broad topic that we are going to possibly develop in the next two videos. Well, this is today's main topic. Today is about sharing a bit about the coherence that obus has in an electromagnetic sense. Let's remember a little bit that I tried to introduce ORMEs as an electromagnetic matrix. I use seawater as a nutritional base, and in this case, well, in order to understand what division through Orbos and DIA is, the fact that an electromagnetic coherence can be generated, we need to remember that our brain operates with a kind of electromagnetic emphasis based on our own design, that we are essentially like a kind of Tesla tower but completely organic, and we are suddenly a computer of about the organic computer, and even a kind of organic nuclear reactor that is our own manifestation. So to tackle the topic a bit, first we need a bit of basic knowledge about this set of electromagnetic waves that we have at the level of the cerebral cortex. Well, alpha brain waves are the most suitable to enhance everything related to cognition and the coherence of our own attention. That is, if at some point studies have been conducted or it has been evidenced that the fact that it increases performance, intellectual academic performance, through the use of some of these elements in the monatomic state, as it is now, where we are going to have these evidences. The alpha brainwave state has been described as their life a natural meal. Here for a Dr. Herbert Benson. Who is this gentleman here? Who was the founder of the Peace Corps Institute Mendy, Harvard Medicine, and the author of numerous books on meditation, or even like this book that we can see here, the one titled Vibrational Medicine.
Well, it has been demonstrated
through this set of experiences that these alpha brain waves, they improve the mind, sleep, and meditation while preventing depression and anxiety. This state can significantly improve sleep, mental focus, mood, memory, and overall health. Let's focus here now. What are alpha brain waves? Well, then, the alpha brain waves, they usually oscillate are patterns of electromagnetic frequency that is constantly oscillating between 8 to 12 cycles per second, that is, between 8 to 12 hertz. That was discovered in 1934 by this gentleman over here, Dr. Hans Berger, there. And he shows that alpha waves are dominant during moments of calm thinking, and they can be found in all regions of the cerebral cortex. Alpha waves assist with mental coordination and integrations. Generally, what they do is they play an important role in the state of rest and attention of the brain. As we can see here, there are different types of brain electromagnetic waves, such as beta, alpha, delta, theta, gamma. These brain waves are they dissipate throughout our day-to-day, and also it's not that we have a single wave, but these are constantly modulated by the environment, by the situations we are living, by our day-to-day, by the worries, in all this that we are going to see now in an integral way. Well, when alpha waves have too small an amplitude, in other words, when these electromagnetic waves, as we see here, are below the normal pattern, a very, very low frequency, this can be correlated with negative behavior, such as social withdrawal and depression clinically. On the contrary, when alpha waves have an adequate amplitude and a high enough frequency, this usually indicates a completely healthy brain. This happens because the alpha state helps to introduce sensory information to the cortex. So very little alpha, use very little. This alpha state of that electromagnetic magnitude would allow sensory pathways that are more irrelevant to inappropriately activate the whole complex. At the cortical neuronal level, in addition to its role in activating sensory information, alpha waves are also related to the allocation of various resources of the cerebral cortex itself.
Everything's okay.
Example, when we need some concentration on a task, our brain, what it does is assign more resources to that task. Likewise, when we are relaxed and not focused on anything,
Thank you.
our brain, what it does is reduce its level of activity and it relaxes.
Come here for a minute.
Think of it as a car stopped at the traffic light and whose engine is not working harder but is still running to be ready for something necessary. The alpha waves, they decrease during sleep cycles and participate in the mechanisms of bonding and allocation of different resources with regard to orientation in succession of walls. This means that as we fall asleep, our brain waves become slower and rhythms. This is also considered a theta state until we finally reach deep sleep, that this is a state of alert. So here we have to keep in mind that we have different brainwave states, like alpha state and beta, for example. Both are polar in this sense. In a beta state, for example, is a completely emotional state that manifests at the cortex level when we are in a state of great concern. Sometimes your anxiety or that, we are in the same panic, something active. Normally one facet is in slow state. And a low state is not actually that emotional.
It's not this one more.
Analytical and pragmatic centered. That would be the alpha state. The theta state, it's an even more mental state, even more positive. But it's between an oscillation towards
To the phases between wakefulness and
the
today.
salary. The delta state itself is a deep state. And as we can see here in this scheme, the state, gamma waves by the gamma state also, that there is a type of wave here, is when there are experiences of fear sometimes, of synchronization or extreme panic expansion. The beta probes
Arrived at
to be manifested in the concern, in the sense of being focused on a single specific point. In the alpha wave state, it's more like a meditative state, a reflective and creative in that sense, in that state. That's why emotion doesn't intervene much in theta waves. It's the state of visualization towards trance. For example, it's a hypnotic state, a trance state. That kind of delta waves can manifest. And in the delta state is when we are manifesting ourselves in
It
sex.
manifests itself in a deep dream.
So the fact that the electromagnetic waves of type are present, alpha will generate an alpha mental state. What is an alpha mental state? Well, it's when the brain waves are associated with different states of consciousness, and the alpha state is important since it's like an ideal balance point between worlds, that is, between the inner world and the outer world. When we have control of our ego, for example, in that sense, it is manifested a wave, an alpha mental state. People who have low alpha amplitudes tend to have a risk of illness. They tend to be a bit inflexible and can't easily change their mood or state. However, they can benefit from consuming the hormones that increases their alpha amplitude. Later, we will see the reason why, as it helps to change in an easier and more appropriate way between different states of consciousness in reality. This has been demonstrated thanks to different studies, and even its evidence is manifested in the I don't know if I told you about this documentary that's here. And I've also posted it on the Telegram page, which is subtitled in Spanish. Currently on the Telegram page of Hormuz, Peru, which is called All Gold You Can Eat. All the Gold You Can Eat. A documentary that I highly recommend, especially for beginners, to understand what the Hormuz is, what this exotic matter is. Well, the alpha mental state is achieved by turning inward and distancing a bit from the egocentrism that consumes most people. Therefore, when consuming Hormuz, people usually experience a feeling of serenity, of peace, and they acquire new skills and possibilities in this whole process. This state is seen as a coping ability. Resilience, i.e., it's a condition or an electromagnetic state, a dynamic at our brain level that allows us to adapt to different situations, which is why I consider it an adaptogen in itself. Well, the alpha state is often related to the notion that is a doctor named Tom Hartman. When we transition from sleep to wakefulness, a fractal interaction occurs. In other words, this means that the mind becomes more aware and open when living the dream. And this can be induced even in our body. It can be induced to an alpha state, and it can prove to be totally useful for people who are sometimes looking to recover from a traumatic experience or enhance their spiritual awareness. In that sense, some of the benefits of entering an alpha state are increased awareness, a better understanding, and this is related even when a person may have suffered previous traumas, as well as other benefits that vary according to it. According to the individual, this state is also associated with a feeling of confidence and decision, as a better performance under pressure or in the environment itself. Well, these experiences have also been studied by Dr. Edmond Tomaselli in the document I shared on Telegram. In the document that is on the Telegram page of Almost Peru, this document, if you can look for it there, is titled Use of Elements in Monatomic State as a Support Tool in Clinical Psychology to increase understanding, normalization of the immune system, and it helps raise consciousness levels. Well, Dr. Edmundo Tomaselli, on behalf of a great curriculum, as we can see over here, he used these elements in monatomic state, which he named MARAS, as a psychological medical tool to help raise the consciousness levels of each person. Well, there is also a lot of evidence about a known institute named Alpha Brain, Swiss Institute, which highlights the correlation between the use of elements in a monatomic state in suspension, as it is the hormone, colloidal gold, and plasma gold, as we will also see soon, which, as I was saying, we will discuss in a future video, which is quite a revolution in that sense. And well, basically, if we take into account a monatomic gold, proof that yes, through this an increase in alpha brainwaves is generated. And they use a brain stimulation technique called transcranial stimulation, of the alternating current. In their studies, as they have observed a reduction of symptoms of depression. There are currently studies evaluating the correlation of the auric field even through the consumption of hormones by means of specialized cameras such as Kirlian cameras. And as we know, this aura effect, as I mentioned in previous videos, is the result of the amplitude of the biological transmutations that occur in a cascade over time of our entire body. Well, the Swiss Institute showed that taking hormones or taking elements in a monatomic state, we were put on a 7.53 Hz state frequency coinciding with the resonance frequency of the Earth, or Schumann's harmonics, or its resonance, which, well, are constantly oscillating too, but it's the way that the whole electromagnetic matrix works just like our brain, and they knew that in the past and that must be currently hidden under the mystery of many cathedrals themselves. These studies can be corroborated according to the links that I am going to leave here. Surely I'm going to leave them in the description of the institute, for example, Alpha-Learn International, where they show all the benefits of monatomic gold and the benefits that are given by consuming the elements in M state, such as O.r.m.e itself, as well as the studies at the level of what is the repair of the DNA and what is coherence during what is learning. There are studies here. For example, they can take a break and look at some laws about what is neurofeedback and the spirituality using elements as to generate that coherence network. As I always mention, at some point, it's the change of this connection, that we are going to have a person who sometimes has a deficit of minerals, a deficit of different types of compounds, of catalysts. They have a connection like a slow internet coaxial cable from one cell to another, changes when we use elements in a monatomic state. From the organs properly, we change this slow connection to a connection of internet, so to speak, of fiber optics, which is much more efficient, much faster, because we really are bodies based on that structure, properly lighting. So this is what generates this coherence at a brain level and at an electromagnetic level, and which precisely allows for the repair sometimes of DNA codes, all of this, but based on the signal that we are going to provide, that will be provided by our emotions and by the coherence that we are having with interest environment. No, that's very important. Well, some studies also that have been bequeathed by Barry Carter claim to have measured the effects of brain coherence shortly after the intake of the O.r.m.es. These studies were then shared by a distribution and production company called Ethereum Gold, whose page you can visit here. I'll also leave it for you, which is called Harmonic, where they testified that these elements in the anatomical stomach, they are currently used in many schools in Great Britain, thanks to the tests from the Alpha Learning Institute reports. Who was that main institute that investigated what was the behavior, the efficiency, like to be able to use these elements in learning difficulties, both in children who had dyslexia and in children who had ADHD. During a period of 6 weeks, for example, from September of the year 2002, there are studies that we are going to leave suddenly here. From the Test Institute, it is proven that these anatomical stomach elements, like the O.r.m.es in 10 volunteers, 5 men and 5 women, aged between 17 and 52 years, performing different electroencephalographic explorations at every step of the way of all your study. And well, then the results in this sense were surprising. And now the use of those graphs, for example, that are there here. They are generated to demonstrate the effects of the improvement in alpha wave states in what is hemispheric synchronization through the use of these elements. What really made those educational establishments sharpen exactly their hearing to pay attention to this set of elements was the final comment from the research director, who said that if he were to conduct a mental or physical examination, would he take a surreal hit, referring to that company's O.r.m.es, minutes before a performance of an exam. So the most obvious results and consistent findings were observed during encephalographic reading measurements. The frequencies or the brain waves they had a trend towards equilibrium, and well, all frequency bands also showed greater activation. So we could casually say that people with high theta activity compared to beta are taught to use the right side of the brain more. They are more creative, meditative, artistic people oriented in an Eastern way, and a special way even. People with high beta activity in comparison to theta, and are considered of, they use more the left brain, and well, they are more logical people, more inclined to mathematics orientated to in a linear way. And when the Hormuz elements are introduced, they seem to balance the differences between both forces. And from these ranges, they tend to help people have a brain, a much more brain integral, a much more coherent in the middle of the two hemispheres. The phenomenon we observe here then is the increase of this neurological energy, which is relative to all frequency bands. Apparently, in some way, it has the effect of energizing or opening neural pathways. Then we'll see why, if it can be called a kind of cellular homeostasis. And we can see this in these three studies too, links that we are going to leave here. And we are also going to leave it in the description of these resources so that you can have access to this information that is a bit dense in reality, since what I am doing right now is an argument of all these bases, just like this document that I leave to you. The link is on this page here, which is called science.gov, where you can currently see what the condition is through the use, for example, of monatomic gold, which would be linked to what is the use of plasma, but obviously also of gold colloids. Well, Orbus, for its presence of monoatomic gold, let's call it that, we return to understand what the presence of monatomic gold to the group of elements of the group is. Latin, that is in traces precisely.
That is in a state of activity.
Well, for example, here, what is manifested on this page are studies like the study of gold nanotubes that generates a magnetic encapsulation and its properties on some conditions of use up to therapeutic. Here, for example, is the use of gold encapsulation, then how different types are graduated, the dynamics that can
Have
be,
the gold in the connection on
the synapses that we can basically come to have at the neuronal level.
There is
Study room here. Just like this study we have here about the transcription and vision of gold modified oligonucleotides in nanoparticles. The three, it's a whole world. And well, but as here we go, we are generating a little seed of interest for you so you can, from one time, resources that can be left here can be read if you want to expand your knowledge. Well, when the Hormuz
We're all the
enter
same.
in the mouth, no direct brain reaction occurs, but this is the effect
say the science.
chain by the contact of the monoatomic element with the saliva electrolyte. That's why, I usually recommend that you try. Place under the tongue. Wait a minute. Where am I? Of the exit. Then, when this contact is generated, an electrochemical reaction occurs that is strong enough to activate the sodium and potassium battery we have. Well, the neurons, what they do at that moment is to start firing. They light up properly, a fractal dance is generated, a synchronous harmony, and it creates a balance from left to right at the brain level. So that balance allows so that the brain gravitates towards an alpha state. This is due to the superconductivity exhibited by elements in a monatomic state. So we would have to ask ourselves this question too. Why is there this brain coherence? Well, this coherence is achieved because of the microtubules, which are structures similar to this, for example, are tiny tubular structures within neurons that are made in two forms of tubulin. Well, these emit tiny pulsating electric currents, and it has been proposed that these tubulin units can be binary operators. That is, they are brain on and off structures. For the monatomic elements, what the organ elements do is increase the potential processing rate from 10 to the 11th UPS, which are operations per second, to 10 to the 24 operations per second. So here, what is done is to generate a whole quantum effect. It is an observable quantum effect in the brain, human and will, that is caused by that the ORMEs will allow for highly aligned water located within these microtubules at the complex level.
And you're all done now.
So the ORMEs in this condition, what it does is eliminate the noise that surround us to generate the focus of our will. That is in a state.
In a high state, the great ones.
Wise men, therefore, sometimes had access to their consciousness and cerebral electromagnetic coherence when they sometimes walked through the desert,
Or they were spending some time
inside a cave until it came out. Then those isolations allowed them,
but-
in alpha states, they would sometimes come up with a solution to the
I
problem.
have searched for that. So you need to
And
know.
even identify the noise
That
that
drains our energy. What tends to be resentment, anger, envy, lack of forgiveness. That's actually noise. That's a lot more electromagnetic noise than it might be surrounding us from the Wi-Fi, from the cell antennas. It's a noise that's within us because we are projecting that distortion
I'll
field.
see you
And
all.
then that distortion field, because
Thanks for watching the video.
emotions induce us towards other brainwave states. But as long as we are in an alpha state, we will be able
work
to.
in those states.
What was it exactly achieving? Like the ancient wise comments, when in stages of isolation found silence, found coherence through sleep and order
Assemble the wave phases.
from the electrical waves of his brain. And well, from this,
booster
we
in
can
mind.
consider almost as little stations.
Nothing catches us.
And that in each cell of the body, what these radio stations do is they get information from the plasma, the chi, the BRE, the orgo, the soap opera,
This is Kundalini
the plane,
Maraca.
or whatever you want to call it, of that fifth state of the matrix. Morphic field matrix, as we could call it, and then it allows to store it, bring it to the cells, store them. It's not only going to store pulses of coherent energy, but what the cell is also going to store is conscious to the light that is going to be totally diffused by the structure that it's going to provide. A set of elements in a monatomic state of high coherence. So that's going to allow us to lower the signal from the artificial electromagnetic noise that surrounds us and is going to let us in coherence and integration for the health of our home and in our mind, especially in our body. Well, that's everything I wanted to share for now. It has been quite brief actually, but this is something a real opening for others.
For what's coming.